The dust cloud rising from the stagecoach accident could be seen for miles across the Arizona desert, and Ophelia Vance knew with absolute certainty that her traveling days had come to an abrupt and painful end. She sat in the dirt beside the overturned coach, her cream-colored dress torn and stained with red earth, watching as the other passengers dusted themselves off and assessed their injuries. The driver had already mounted one of the freed horses and ridden toward Ash Fork for help, leaving behind 3 passengers and Ophelia, who remained seated because she knew what would come next. "We should start walking," said Mrs. Henderson, a thin woman with sharp features who had spent the entire journey from Flagstaff complaining about the heat. "It cannot be more than 5 miles to town." Ophelia looked at the horizon where heat waves danced above the scrubland, making the distant mountains shimmer like mirages. 5 miles might as well have been 50. She had learned long ago that her body did not cooperate with such expectations, that what others found merely difficult she found impossible. "You go ahead," Ophelia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I will wait here for help to return." "Nonsense," said Mr. Patterson, a banker from Philadelphia who clearly had no understanding of the West. "We must all stay together. The savages could be anywhere." Ophelia bit back a sharp retort about his ignorance. The Apache in this region had signed treaties years ago, in 1873, and it was now 1885. Most had been forced onto reservations, though she had heard stories of small bands still living free in the mountains. But that was not what concerned her. What concerned her was the look in Mrs. Henderson's eyes, the same look she had seen countless times before. "Perhaps the young lady is injured," Mrs. Henderson said, though her tone suggested she believed no such thing. "Are you hurt, dear?" "No," Ophelia admitted. "I am perfectly well, just shaken." "Then we should walk," the woman pressed. The third passenger, a young salesman named Timothy Crane, had been quiet until now. "Maybe she does not feel up to it. The accident was rather severe." "She looks perfectly healthy to me," Mrs. Henderson said, and there it was, the judgment Ophelia had been waiting for. "Perhaps too healthy, if you take my meaning." The words hung in the desert air like the dust that still swirled around them. Ophelia felt her cheeks burn, though whether from shame or anger she could not say. She had heard variations of this her entire life. Too healthy, too robust, too substantial. Pretty words for a simple truth. She was a large woman in a world that demanded women be small and delicate. "I will wait for help," Ophelia repeated, firmer this time. Mrs. Henderson sniffed and gathered her skirts. "Well, I certainly cannot wait in this heat. Come along, Mr. Patterson, Mr. Crane. We will send help back when we reach town." The 3 set off across the desert, their figures growing smaller against the vast landscape. Ophelia watched them go, relieved to be alone yet dreading what came next. Eventually someone would arrive from Ash Fork, probably with a wagon. They would take one look at her and wonder how to transport her. She had seen it before. The quick calculations in their eyes, the barely concealed concern about whether their vehicle could bear her weight, whether their horses were strong enough. She stood and walked to the overturned stagecoach, seeking what little shade it provided. Her trunk had come loose in the accident and lay burst open nearby, her belongings scattered across the ground. She gathered what she could. A few dresses, her mother's Bible, the small wooden box containing her father's pocket watch and her mother's wedding ring. Everything she owned in the world fit into her arms. Ophelia had been traveling to Ash Fork to take a position as a schoolteacher, one of the few respectable occupations available to an unmarried woman of 23. The town was desperate enough for educated teachers that they had hired her based solely on her credentials, without requiring the customary interview. She suspected that if they had seen her first, the position would have mysteriously become unavailable. It had happened before in Colorado, and before that in Kansas. The sun climbed higher, and Ophelia rationed the small canteen of water she had managed to salvage. She tried not to think about Mrs. Henderson and her cutting remarks, tried not to dwell on the lifetime of similar comments that stretched behind her like the rutted road they had traveled. Instead, she thought about her new position, about the children she would teach, about building a life in this small Arizona town where perhaps, just perhaps, she might find some measure of peace. The sound of hoofbeats brought her back to the present. She stood, shading her eyes against the glare, expecting to see a wagon approaching. Instead, she saw a single rider on a massive gray horse, moving at an easy lope across the desert floor. As they drew closer, Ophelia could make out more details. A tall man in dusty clothes, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, a horse that must have stood at least 17 hands high. The rider pulled up a few yards away, and Ophelia got her first clear look at him. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled at the collar of his shirt. His eyes, when he pushed back his hat, were a startling blue against his tanned face. He dismounted with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than on foot. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Name's Wesley Granger. The stage driver sent me out from Ash Fork, said there was a lady needed help." "Ophelia Vance," she replied, trying to read his expression. Was that pity in his eyes, surprise? She could not tell. "The others walked to town. I chose to wait." Wesley looked at the overturned coach, then back at her. "Wise choice. It is a hard walk in this heat, and from what I hear, you are the new schoolteacher. Ash Fork needs you in one piece." Something in his matter-of-fact tone eased the tightness in Ophelia's chest. He did not seem to be making calculations or judgments, just stating facts. Still, the next part would be difficult. It was always difficult. "I appreciate you coming for me," Ophelia said carefully, "though I fear your horse may not be up to carrying double all the way to town." Wesley looked at his horse, then back at her, his expression genuinely confused. "Goliath. He can carry double just fine. He is the strongest horse in the territory." "Yes, but—" Ophelia hesitated, hating herself for what she had to say next. "I am rather heavy. Most horses cannot manage my weight, even alone. I would not want to injure your animal." The words cost her something to speak, as they always did. They required her to acknowledge her body as a problem, as something that needed apologizing for. She watched Wesley's face, waiting for the understanding to dawn, for the awkwardness that would follow. Instead, Wesley smiled. It was a genuine smile, warm and without a trace of mockery. "Madam, Goliath is a Percheron cross. He pulls a freight wagon in town when we need him to. I reckon he has hauled loads that would make a regular saddle horse weep. You will not be any trouble at all." Ophelia stared at him, not quite believing what she had heard. "Are you certain?" "Certain as sunrise," Wesley said. He gathered her scattered belongings and tied them behind his saddle with practiced efficiency, then led Goliath closer. The horse was indeed enormous, with the broad chest and powerful hindquarters of a draft breed mixed with the finer head of a riding horse. He stood calmly as Wesley checked the girth and adjusted the stirrups. "I should still wait for a wagon," Ophelia said, though her conviction was wavering. The sun was brutal, and the thought of hours more in this heat was not appealing. "Next wagon will not be out until tomorrow morning," Wesley said. "And there is a storm coming in from the west. You can see the clouds building over the mountains. We should get moving before it hits." Ophelia looked where he pointed and saw the dark line on the horizon. Arizona storms could be violent, and she had no desire to be caught in one with nothing but an overturned stagecoach for shelter. Still, the old fear held her back. How many times had she embarrassed herself trying to mount horses that could not bear her? How many times had she seen that flash of alarm in people's eyes when she approached their animals? Wesley seemed to sense her hesitation. "Miss Vance, I give you my word as a gentleman and a horseman. Goliath can carry us both without any strain. I would not make the offer if it were not true." Something in his earnest expression decided her. Ophelia nodded, and Wesley brought Goliath alongside a rock that would serve as a mounting block. Even with the boost, it was an ungainly process. Ophelia had to hike her skirts in a most unladylike manner and struggle into the saddle while trying to maintain some shred of dignity. She was breathing hard by the time she settled, certain she must look ridiculous. Wesley mounted behind her with the same easy grace he had shown earlier, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. Goliath shifted his weight, but showed no sign of distress. In fact, the big horse seemed perfectly content, merely turning his head slightly as if to check that everyone was settled. "See," Wesley said, and Ophelia could hear the smile in his voice. Not even breathing hard. They set off at a steady walk, and Ophelia found herself acutely aware of Wesley's presence behind her. It had been years since she had been this close to a man who was not her father or a doctor. She could feel the warmth of his chest against her back, smell the scent of leather and horse and something that might have been sage. It was both uncomfortable and oddly comforting. "How do you come to have such a horse?" she asked, partly from genuine curiosity and partly to break the silence. "My father bred him special," Wesley said. "My pa runs a freight business, hauling supplies between Ash Fork and the mining camps. He wanted horses that could pull heavy loads but still be ridden when needed. Goliath was the first successful cross, 5 years back. We have bred a dozen more since then, but Goliath is still the finest. Your father must be quite knowledgeable about horses." "He is. Learned it from his father, who learned it from his. Grangers have been horse people for 3 generations now. I suppose I will carry it on, though my younger brother might take over the freight business." They rode in silence for a while, the horse's steady gait eating up the miles. The sun beat down on them, but a breeze had picked up, carrying the smell of distant rain. Ophelia found herself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. Wesley did not seem inclined to make conversation just to fill the silence, and she appreciated that. "The other passengers said you chose to wait rather than walk," Wesley said eventually. "That was smart thinking. Folks from back east do not always understand how dangerous the desert can be." Ophelia almost told him the truth, almost explained that it had not been wisdom but necessity that kept her behind. But something held her back. For the first time in recent memory, someone was treating her as though she had made a reasonable choice, not a shameful concession to her limitations. She found she wanted to keep that feeling a little longer. "I grew up in Texas," she said instead. "I know better than to walk 5 miles in the midday heat without proper water." "Texas, you are a long way from home." "I have been a long way from home for years now. My parents passed when I was 18. I have been teaching wherever I could find positions." "That must be a hard life, always moving." "It has its challenges," Ophelia admitted, "but teaching is important work. Children need education, especially out here where opportunities can be scarce." "Ash Fork's children are lucky to have you then. The last teacher left after 6 months. Said the town was too rough for a lady." "What do you think? Is it too rough?" Wesley was quiet for a moment, considering. "It is a mining town, so there are rough elements, but there are good people too, families trying to build something lasting. I think you will find it a decent place if you give it a chance." The conversation lapsed again, but it was a comfortable silence now. Ophelia watched the landscape roll by, the endless expanse of scrubland dotted with sagebrush and the occasional Joshua tree. In the distance, the mountains rose like jagged teeth, their peaks lost in the gathering clouds. "We are going to get wet," Wesley observed. "Storm is moving faster than I thought. We should pick up the pace." Goliath moved into a smooth trot, covering ground quickly without jarring his riders. Ophelia had to admit she was impressed. She had ridden plenty of horses in her youth before her weight became an issue, but none had been as comfortable as this massive animal. The draft horse breeding gave him a gentle gait despite his size, and his strength meant he carried them both as easily as another horse might carry a single rider. The first drops of rain hit just as the town came into view. Ash Fork sprawled along a valley, a collection of wooden buildings that looked both temporary and permanent at once. The main street was wide and dusty, lined with the usual assortment of saloons, general stores, and boarding houses. At the far end, Ophelia could see the white spire of a church, and nearby, what must be the schoolhouse. Wesley guided Goliath straight to a neat, two-story house on the edge of town. By the time they arrived, the rain was coming down in earnest, those fat drops that promised a real storm. He dismounted and helped Ophelia down, his hands strong and steady. Together they ran for the porch as lightning split the sky. "This is the boarding house run by Mrs. Sarah Winters," Wesley explained, raising his voice over the thunder. "She has been expecting you. Your room is already prepared." Before Ophelia could respond, the door flew open and a plump woman in her 50s appeared, her face creased with concern. "Get in here before you both catch your death. Wesley Granger, what were you thinking, bringing her through the storm?" "Storm came up faster than expected, Mrs. Winters," Wesley said, grinning. "We outran most of it." Mrs. Winters ushered Ophelia inside while Wesley retrieved her belongings from Goliath's saddle. The interior of the boarding house was warm and welcoming, with lace curtains and polished wood floors. The smell of baking bread filled the air, and Ophelia felt something in her chest loosen. This, at least, felt like a home. "You poor dear, what an introduction to Ash Fork," Mrs. Winters fussed, taking Ophelia's wet shawl. "First the stage accident, then riding through a storm. You must be exhausted." "I am well enough," Ophelia said. "Mr. Granger was very kind to come for me." "Wesley is one of the good ones," Mrs. Winters agreed, casting an approving look at the young man as he set down Ophelia's trunk. "His whole family is decent folk. Now, let me show you to your room so you can get out of those wet clothes. I will bring up hot water for washing and some tea." Wesley touched his hat brim. "I should get Goliath to the stable. Miss Vance, I hope you settle in well. I am sure I will see you around town." "Mr. Granger," Ophelia said, stopping him at the door. "Thank you for everything. You were very kind." He smiled that same warm, genuine smile. "Welcome to Ash Fork, Miss Vance." Then he was gone, back into the rain and Mrs. Winters was leading Ophelia up a narrow staircase to a small but clean room overlooking the main street. As promised, hot water arrived shortly, followed by tea and biscuits. Ophelia changed into dry clothes and sat by the window, watching the rain pour down and the occasional figure dash through the muddy street. She thought about Wesley Granger and his enormous horse, about the easy way he had dismissed her concerns about her weight. Most men, when faced with her size, reacted in one of two ways. They either treated her with barely concealed disgust, or they made a show of not noticing while their eyes betrayed their true feelings. Wesley had done neither. He had simply solved the problem with practical efficiency, as though it were no more remarkable than choosing the right tool for a job. It had been so long since someone had made her feel normal, even ordinary. The sensation was dizzying, dangerous even. She could not afford to read too much into simple kindness. Wesley Granger was just a helpful citizen welcoming the new schoolteacher to town. Nothing more. But still, as she drifted off to sleep that night, her last thought was of strong hands helping her down from a horse, and a voice saying with absolute certainty, "Not for mine." The next morning dawned clear and cool, the storm having washed the dust from the air. Ophelia dressed carefully in her best day dress, a deep blue cotton that her mother had helped her make years ago. She pinned her dark hair into a neat bun and studied herself in the small mirror above the washstand. Her face was pleasant enough, she thought, with large brown eyes and a straight nose. But the mirror only showed her from the shoulders up, hiding the body that had caused her so much grief. Breakfast at the boarding house was a lively affair. Mrs. Winters introduced her to the other residents. An elderly prospector named Mr. Chen who had struck it rich years ago and now lived a quiet life in town. 2 young miners who were polite but shy, and a widow named Mrs. Rebecca Ashford who ran the general store. Everyone seemed genuinely pleased to meet the new teacher, and no one made any comments about her appearance that Ophelia could detect. After breakfast, Mrs. Winters walked with her to the schoolhouse. The building was simple but solid, a single large room with rows of desks, a pot-bellied stove for winter, and a good-sized blackboard. Books lined one wall and maps hung above the blackboard. It was better equipped than some schools Ophelia had taught in. "The town council had it fixed up special when they knew you were coming," Mrs. Winters explained. "They are real eager to have proper schooling for the children. Too many of them have been running wild." Ophelia spent the morning familiarizing herself with the materials and planning her first lessons. School would start on Monday, giving her 3 more days to prepare. She was deep in thought about arithmetic primers when a knock at the door startled her. Wesley Granger stood in the doorway, hat in hand. In the full light of day, she could see him more clearly, tall and broad-shouldered, with the lean build of someone who worked hard for a living. His face was open and friendly, with small lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. "Miss Vance, I hope I am not disturbing you," he said. "I wanted to check that you settled in all right and to bring you this." He held out a small wooden box, neatly made with a brass latch. Ophelia took it, confused. Inside was a collection of colorful stones, each one different. Smooth river rocks, pieces of quartz, what looked like turquoise, even a small geode split to reveal purple crystals inside. "For teaching," Wesley explained. "My mother was a teacher before she married my father. She used to use rocks to teach all sorts of things, counting, colors, geography. I thought maybe you could use them too." Ophelia was touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "This is very kind of you. I can think of several lessons these would be perfect for." "Good. That makes me glad." Wesley shifted his weight, suddenly looking uncertain. "I also wanted to apologize if I made you uncomfortable yesterday, riding double like that. I know it was not entirely proper, but with the storm coming, I did not think there was much choice." "You were a perfect gentleman," Ophelia assured him. "And you were right about Goliath. He is a remarkable horse." Wesley's face lit up at the mention of his horse. "Would you like to meet him properly? I have him over at my father's stable. It is not far and the walk is pleasant." Ophelia hesitated, aware that being seen walking alone with a young man would cause talk. But then again, she was the schoolteacher, a position that granted her some independence. And truthfully, she wanted to see the horse again, wanted to spend more time with Wesley and his easy manner. "I would like that," she said. They walked through town together, Wesley pointing out important buildings and introducing her to people they passed. The baker, Mr. Hoffman, promised to save her a loaf of his sourdough every Saturday. The doctor, a young man named Dr. Philip Stone, welcomed her warmly and said he looked forward to discussing books with her. Apparently, reading material was scarce in Ash Fork. The seamstress, Miss Lucy Hart, sized Ophelia up with a professional eye and offered to make her some new dresses at a fair price. Everyone was friendly, and no one stared or whispered as Ophelia had learned to expect in new places. She began to wonder if perhaps Ash Fork might be different from the other towns she had tried to make her home. The Granger stables sat at the north end of town, a large, well-built structure with a fenced paddock beside it. Half a dozen horses grazed in the paddock, all of them large, sturdy animals clearly bred for work rather than speed. A tall man who could only be Wesley's father was working with one of them, running his hands down its legs with practiced care. "Pa, this is Miss Ophelia Vance, the new teacher," Wesley called out. "Miss Vance, my father, William Granger." William Granger straightened and came over to shake her hand. He was an older version of Wesley, with the same blue eyes and easy smile, though his hair had gone gray and his face was more weathered. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Vance. Wesley told me about the stage accident. I am glad you came through it all right." "Thanks to your son and his horse," Ophelia said. "Goliath is special, that is certain," William agreed. "Come, I will show you." He led them into the stable, where Goliath stood in a large box stall, munching contentedly on hay. The horse lifted his head when he saw Wesley and nickered softly. Up close and in good light, Ophelia could fully appreciate the animal's size. He was truly massive, easily the largest horse she had ever seen, with a gentle eye that belied his strength. Wesley produced an apple from his pocket and fed it to Goliath, who crunched it with evident pleasure. "He is a sweetheart, really. All the draft breeding gives him a calm temperament, nothing much bothers him." "Can I touch him?" Ophelia asked. "Of course." She reached out and stroked Goliath's broad neck. His coat was soft, well cared for, and he leaned into her touch like a cat. She found herself smiling, charmed by the big horse's gentle nature. "We have been trying to breed more like him," William said. "The trick is getting the right balance. Too much draft blood and they are too slow for riding. Too much riding blood and they lose the strength. Goliath is perfect, but replicating that perfection is challenging." "How many horses do you have now?" Ophelia asked. 14 in total, including the breeding stock. "We sell most of them to freight companies and ranches. There is good demand for strong, reliable horses in this territory." They spent another hour at the stables, with William and Wesley enthusiastically explaining their breeding program and introducing her to the other horses. Ophelia found herself genuinely interested, asking questions about bloodlines and training methods. Both men seemed pleased by her interest, answering her questions with patience and detail. As the sun climbed toward noon, Wesley walked her back to the boarding house. "I hope I did not bore you with all that horse talk," he said. "Not at all. It is fascinating work. Your father clearly has a gift for it, and you have learned well from him." "I love it," Wesley admitted. "Some days I think I would be content to spend my whole life around horses. They are honest creatures. They do not lie or scheme or judge. They just are what they are." There was something wistful in his tone that made Ophelia look at him more closely. "That sounds like the voice of experience." Wesley gave a self-deprecating shrug. "Just the usual small-town politics." Ash Fork is a good place, but like anywhere, there are people who like to gossip and meddle. I prefer the company of horses sometimes. They had reached the boarding house, and Ophelia realized she did not want the morning to end. It had been pleasant, easy in a way that social interactions rarely were for her. Wesley did not make her feel self-conscious or judged. He talked to her like she was just another person, someone worth knowing. "Thank you for the tour," she said, "and for the teaching stones. I will put them to good use. I am glad. And Miss Vance, if you need anything at all as you settle in, please do not hesitate to ask. I know it can be lonely starting over in a new place." "You are very kind, Mr. Granger." "Wesley, please, we do not stand much on formality out here." "Then you must call me Ophelia," he smiled. "Ophelia it is. I will see you around town, I am sure." She watched him walk back down the street, his long stride eating up the distance. Mrs. Winters appeared at her elbow, making her jump. "That Wesley Granger is a fine young man," the older woman said with a knowing look, "and unmarried if you were wondering." "I was not wondering," Ophelia said, though her cheeks flushed. "Of course not, dear. Come inside. Lunch is ready." The next few days passed in a flurry of preparation. Ophelia organized the schoolhouse, planned her first week of lessons, and met with the members of the town council to discuss their expectations for the school. She learned that she would be teaching about 20 children ranging in age from 6 to 14, with varying levels of education. It would be challenging, but she had faced similar situations before. She also got to know Ash Fork better. It was a mining town, its economy built on the silver and copper pulled from the mountains, but it also served as a supply hub for the scattered ranches and smaller settlements in the region. The railroad had come through 2 years earlier, connecting Ash Fork to Flagstaff and, beyond that, to the rest of the country. It was a town in transition, caught between the rough frontier days and something more settled and civilized. Ophelia found that she liked it. The people were friendly without being intrusive, and the town had an energy to it, a sense of possibility. She could imagine building a life here, putting down roots for the first time since her parents had died. She saw Wesley several times during those days. He seemed to be everywhere in town, helping unload freight wagons at the general store, repairing a broken wheel on the doctor's buggy, delivering horses to the livery stable. Each time he saw her, he tipped his hat and asked how she was settling in. Their conversations were brief but pleasant, and Ophelia found herself looking for him without quite meaning to. On Sunday, she attended services at the small church. The minister, Reverend Thomas Price, was a vigorous man in his 60s who preached a sermon about charity and community that seemed aimed at encouraging the townspeople to support one another. Afterward, several families came up to introduce themselves and to promise that their children would be in school bright and early Monday morning. Wesley was there too, sitting with his parents and a younger man who must be his brother. He introduced her to the whole family. His mother, Margaret, a warm woman with kind eyes, and his brother Samuel, who was 19 and clearly idolized Wesley. They invited her to Sunday dinner, but Ophelia politely declined, aware that such an invitation might raise eyebrows. She was still the new schoolteacher, trying to establish herself, and she could not afford to be the subject of gossip. But as she walked back to the boarding house, she found herself wishing she had accepted. The Grangers seemed like genuinely good people, the kind of family she had not had since her own parents passed. The loneliness that had been her constant companion for 5 years felt especially acute that afternoon. Monday morning arrived with a riot of nervous energy. Ophelia was up before dawn, dressing carefully and rehearsing her introduction in her mind. She ate a quick breakfast and arrived at the schoolhouse an hour early, wanting everything to be perfect. The children began arriving shortly after 8. They came in clusters, siblings walking together, small groups from the same neighborhood. Some were clean and neatly dressed, others showed signs of poverty. A few looked eager, most looked wary, and a handful looked openly mutinous. Ophelia had seen it all before. She waited until everyone was seated, then stood before them with her best teacher's posture, straight spine, calm expression, hands folded in front of her. She could feel them assessing her, see the whispers and sidelong glances. She was used to it. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "My name is Miss Vance, and I am your new teacher. We are going to learn many things together this year: reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography. But before we begin, I want to establish some rules." She wrote on the blackboard as she spoke, "Be respectful, be honest, work hard, help each other. These are simple rules, but if we all follow them, this will be a good year. Now, I would like each of you to tell me your name and one thing you hope to learn this year." The introductions went smoothly enough. Most of the children were shy but polite. There were two potential troublemakers: a boy named Jack Morrison, who had a defiant air about him, and his friend Carl Hughes, who seemed to take his cues from Jack. Ophelia made a mental note to keep an eye on both of them. One girl stood out: a thin child of about 8 named Lily Chen, granddaughter of the prospector from the boarding house. She was clearly bright, answering questions quickly and correctly, but she had a sadness about her that worried Ophelia. She made another mental note to learn more about Lily's situation. The morning passed quickly. Ophelia assessed her students' abilities, sorted them into reading groups, and started them on some basic exercises. By lunchtime, she had a good sense of where each child stood and what they would need from her. As the children ran outside to eat their lunches, Wesley appeared in the doorway with a basket. "My mother thought you might appreciate some food," he said. "She packed enough for an army." Inside the basket was fried chicken, fresh bread, cheese, and apple pie. It was far more than Ophelia could eat alone. "This is incredibly generous. Please thank your mother for me. She said to tell you that teachers need their strength and that you should come to dinner soon." Wesley hesitated, then added, "She also said I should make sure you are eating properly." "Apparently, I am supposed to check on you," Ophelia laughed. "Your mother sounds like a force of nature. You have no idea. When Ma gets an idea in her head, there is no stopping her, and she has decided that you need looking after." "I am perfectly capable of looking after myself." "I know that, and you know that, but try telling Ma. It is easier to just go along with it." They sat on the school steps and shared the food. Wesley asked about her first morning, and Ophelia found herself telling him about the students, her concerns about Jack Morrison, her curiosity about young Lily Chen. "Jack is not a bad kid," Wesley said. "His pa is a miner, works long hours, and his ma died 2 years back. He has been running a bit wild since then. As for Lily, her parents died in a mine accident last year. Mr. Chen is doing his best, but he is getting on in years. It is hard for him. That poor child. No wonder she looks so sad. Maybe you can help her. A good teacher can make all the difference. I still remember my teacher, Miss Abernathy. She made me love reading, changed my whole life." "You like to read?" Wesley looked almost embarrassed. "I do, though most folks do not know it. They see the horse trader and freighter, not someone who reads poetry." "Poetry, really? Why do you sound so surprised?" "I suppose I should not be. But most men I have known think poetry is foolishness." "Most men I know cannot read," Wesley said dryly. "I will take my love of Whitman and Longfellow over their ignorance any day." They talked until the children began drifting back, ready for the afternoon session. Wesley gathered up the basket and stood to leave. "Good luck with the afternoon. And remember, dinner at our house soon. Ma will not take no for an answer." The afternoon went well. Ophelia started the older children on a geography lesson using the maps and some of Wesley's teaching stones to represent different types of terrain and resources. The younger ones worked on their letters. By the time 3 o'clock came and she dismissed them, she felt cautiously optimistic. This might actually work. The week continued in much the same way. Each day she grew more confident, more familiar with her students and their needs. Jack Morrison tested her a few times, but she handled him with firm kindness, and by Friday he was actually participating in lessons. Lily Chen proved to be as bright as Ophelia had suspected, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Wesley stopped by most days, always with some excuse, bringing supplies his mother had sent, asking if she needed anything repaired in the schoolhouse, inviting her to various town events. Ophelia began to suspect that his mother was not the only one checking on her. On Friday afternoon, after the children had left, Wesley appeared with an invitation. "Tomorrow is the town social. They hold one every month with dancing and food. I was hoping you might attend and that you might save a dance for me." Ophelia's heart sank. She had managed to avoid thinking about this, but now she had to face it. "Wesley, I do not dance." "Oh, well, we do not have to dance. We could just attend, enjoy the food and company. You do not understand." Ophelia took a breath, steeling herself. "I do not dance because I cannot dance. Dancing requires grace and lightness, and I have neither. I would make a spectacle of myself and embarrass any partner foolish enough to take me onto the floor." Wesley frowned, genuine confusion on his face. "Who told you that?" "Who told me what?" "That you cannot dance. That you lack grace." "Who put that nonsense in your head?" "It is not nonsense, it is fact. I am a large woman, Wesley. I am not built for dancing or any other activity that requires delicacy." "Have you ever actually tried dancing?" The question caught her off guard. "Well, no, not since I was a child. But I know my own limitations." "Meaning you have decided what you cannot do without ever trying," Wesley said, and there was a gentle challenge in his voice. "That does not sound like the brave woman who traveled alone to a new territory to teach children. That is different." "How?" Ophelia struggled to find words. How could she explain a lifetime of being told, directly and indirectly, that her body was wrong? That she took up too much space, weighed too much, was too much in every way? How could she make him understand the shame that had been ground into her bones? Wesley must have seen something in her face because his expression softened. "Ophelia, I am not trying to make you uncomfortable. I am just saying that maybe you are limiting yourself based on what other people think, not on what is actually true. You might surprise yourself. Or I might step on your feet and humiliate us both. I have tough feet. They can take it," he smiled. "Come to the social. If you do not want to dance, we will not dance, but at least come, meet more people, have some fun. You have worked hard all week. You deserve to enjoy yourself." Put that way, it was hard to refuse. "All right, but I am not making any promises about dancing." "Fair enough." The social was held in the largest building in town, a hall used for town meetings and celebrations. By the time Ophelia arrived Saturday evening, it was already crowded with people. Tables lined the walls, laden with food: roasted meats, fresh bread, vegetables, pies, and cakes. A group of musicians was setting up in one corner: a fiddler, a guitarist, and someone with a banjo. Mrs. Winters had helped Ophelia dress for the occasion, lending her a beautiful shawl to drape over her best dress. "You look lovely, dear," the older woman had said, and Ophelia had almost believed her. Now, standing at the edge of the crowded hall, she felt her old self-consciousness creeping back. Everyone else seemed to know each other, to fit into the social fabric of the town. She was still an outsider, still someone on the margins trying to find her place. Then Wesley was there, materializing out of the crowd with 2 cups of punch. "You came. I was worried you might change your mind." "I said I would be here." "That you did. Come on, let me introduce you to some people." He guided her through the room, making introductions. Ophelia met ranchers and miners, shopkeepers and farmers, their wives and children. Everyone was friendly, and many praised her teaching already, passing along compliments from their children. It was gratifying to hear, and gradually she began to relax. The music started, and couples began moving onto the dance floor. Ophelia watched them, feeling the familiar pang of exclusion. Dancing looked like fun, the kind of simple pleasure that other people took for granted. But it was not for her. She had accepted that long ago. "One dance," Wesley said at her elbow. "Just one. If you hate it, we will stop immediately and never speak of it again." "Wesley, I truly cannot." "Cannot or will not," the challenge again, gentle but persistent. Ophelia felt something stir in her chest, some long-buried part of herself that was tired of sitting on the sidelines. What was the worst that could happen? People would stare. They probably already were. She would step on his feet. He had already said he did not mind. She would look foolish. She had looked foolish before and survived it. "One dance," she heard herself say. "But when I humiliate us both, remember this was your idea." Wesley grinned and led her onto the floor. The current dance was ending, and the musicians were taking a brief rest. When they started up again, it was a simple waltz, the kind Ophelia vaguely remembered from her childhood. Wesley took her hand and placed his other hand at her waist. Even through her dress, she could feel the warmth of his palm. "Just follow my lead," he said. "Do not think about it, just feel the music and move." It was awkward at first. Ophelia was stiff with anxiety, convinced that everyone was watching and judging. She stepped on Wesley's foot twice in the first minute and started to pull away, but he held on. "Keep going," he said. "You are doing fine. I am stepping all over you. I have been stepped on by horses. This is nothing." Despite herself, Ophelia laughed. And somehow, with that laugh, something loosened inside her. She stopped thinking so hard about every step and started listening to the music instead. Wesley was a good dancer, his lead clear and steady, and slowly she found herself following more easily. They turned and swayed, moving with the other couples around the floor. Ophelia was not graceful exactly, but she was not the disaster she had feared either. And Wesley never once looked embarrassed or uncomfortable. He looked, she realized with a start, happy. When the music ended, Ophelia was breathless but smiling. "That was not as terrible as I expected. You see, you are full of surprises." Wesley led her off the floor. "Would you like some punch? Dancing is thirsty work." They spent the rest of the evening alternating between dancing and resting, talking and laughing. Wesley introduced her to his family again, and his mother insisted Ophelia must come to Sunday dinner the next day. No arguments accepted. Samuel, Wesley's younger brother, was tongue-tied in her presence, blushing whenever she spoke to him. "He is not used to talking to pretty women," Wesley explained later when Samuel had fled to fetch them more food. "Do not take his shyness personally. He called me pretty." Ophelia asked, startled. "Well, you are." Wesley said it simply, as though it were an obvious fact. "Do you not think so? I think I am too large to be pretty." "Pretty is supposed to be delicate and small," Wesley snorted. "Says who?" Pretty is about the whole person. The way they smile, the light in their eyes, the sound of their laugh. You have all of those things. So yes, you are pretty. Ophelia did not know what to say. She had been called many things in her life, but pretty was not among them. She wanted to dismiss it as flattery, but Wesley's tone was too matter-of-fact for that. He believed what he was saying. Before she could formulate a response, the musicians struck up another waltz. Wesley held out his hand. "One more dance." She took his hand. They danced 3 more times that evening, and with each dance, Ophelia grew more confident. She would never be a skilled dancer, but she could manage well enough to enjoy it. And she did enjoy it. more than she had enjoyed anything in years. When the social finally wound down near midnight, Wesley walked her back to the boarding house. The night was cool and clear, the stars brilliant overhead. They walked slowly, neither seeming eager to end the evening. "Thank you," Ophelia said as they reached her door, "for tonight. For making me try something I thought I could not do. You did it yourself, I just provided the excuse. Still, it meant something to me." Wesley looked at her for a long moment, his face serious in the moonlight. "Ophelia, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Who taught you to think so little of yourself? Who made you believe you were limited and incapable?" The question struck her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. It was not any one person. It was everyone. Every time a chair broke under my weight, every time a horse shied away, every time someone looked at me with pity or disgust, it all added up. "Well, they were all fools," Wesley said fiercely. "Every last one of them. You are one of the strongest, bravest people I have ever met. You traveled across the country alone, you teach children who desperately need education, you face every challenge with grace and dignity. That is what I see when I look at you. That is what anyone with sense sees." Ophelia felt tears prick her eyes. "You barely know me. I know enough. And I would like to know more if you will let me." There it was, laid out plainly between them. Not a flowery declaration, but an honest statement of intent. Wesley wanted to court her, to see where this connection between them might lead. And Ophelia realized, with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, that she wanted that too. "I would like that as well," she said softly. Wesley's smile was brighter than the stars. "Then may I call on you tomorrow? My mother's dinner invitation still stands, but perhaps afterward we could take a walk, just the two of us." "I would like that very much." He took her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles with old-fashioned gallantry. "Good night, Ophelia. Sweet dreams." She watched him walk away into the night, her hand still tingling from his kiss. Then she went inside, climbed the stairs to her room and stood at the window, watching the empty street and feeling like her life had just shifted onto an entirely new path. Sunday dinner at the Granger house was a boisterous affair. The family lived on a small ranch just outside of town, a neat property with the horse barns, a large paddock, and a comfortable house that showed signs of generations of care. Margaret Granger was indeed a force of nature, bustling around her kitchen with practiced efficiency while keeping up a steady stream of conversation. William and Samuel had clearly been doing this for years and knew when to speak and when to simply nod. Wesley helped set the table and carved the roast, moving through the domestic tasks with the same easy competence he showed with horses. The food was delicious. Pot roast with vegetables, fresh bread, and a dried apple pie for dessert. The conversation ranged from town news to national politics to William's ongoing experiments with horse breeding. Ophelia found herself relaxing, laughing at Samuel's jokes and contributing her own thoughts to the discussion. After dinner, Margaret shooed the men out to do the washing up while she and Ophelia sat on the porch with cups of tea. "I am glad Wesley brought you today," the older woman said. "It has been a long time since I have seen him so happy." "We have only known each other a week," Ophelia protested. "Sometimes a week is all it takes. I knew I would marry William after 3 days. When you know, you know." Margaret gave her a shrewd look. "And I think you know too, do not you?" Ophelia felt her cheeks heat. "I like your son very much. But I am still getting settled in Ash Fork, still learning to be the teacher this town needs. I cannot afford to be distracted." "Love is not a distraction, dear. It is fuel. It gives you strength to face whatever challenges come your way." Margaret patted her hand. "But I am not trying to rush you. Just know that you would be welcome in this family, should things progress that way." Wesley appeared before Ophelia could respond, offering his arm. "Ready for that walk?" They strolled along the property's fence line, Goliath and the other horses following them on the opposite side, curious about their activity. The afternoon was warm but pleasant, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and juniper. "Your family is wonderful," Ophelia said. "You are lucky to have them, I know. I do not take it for granted." Wesley paused, then said carefully, "My mother liked you. She does not like everyone." "How can you tell? If she did not like you, she would have been polite but cool. Instead, she was warm and already planning your wedding." Ophelia laughed. She did seem to be looking at me rather speculatively. "Ma wants to see me settled. She worries I will end up alone, married to the horses." Wesley glanced at her. "I have never been much interested in courting before. The girls in town are nice enough, but none of them ever felt right. They all seem to want someone different than who I am." "What do you mean?" "They wanted the idea of me, the successful horse trader, the reliable man who could provide for them. But they did not care about the things I care about. None of them wanted to talk about books or horses or ideas. They just wanted a husband who would give them a comfortable life." "That is not so unreasonable," Ophelia said. "A comfortable life is nothing to dismiss." "I know. And I would want to provide that. But I also want someone who sees me, really sees me, not just the role I fill. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. I have felt invisible my whole life, or else too visible in the wrong ways. People see my body and make assumptions about who I am, what I am capable of. They never look deeper." Wesley stopped walking and turned to face her. "I see you, Ophelia. I see someone brilliant and brave and kind. Someone who cares about children and knowledge and making the world better. Someone who has faced hardship and emerged stronger for it. That is who you are to me." The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. "Wesley, we have known each other such a short time. How can you be so certain?" "Because when I am with you, everything feels right. Simple as that." He took her hand. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking for the chance to court you properly, to spend time together and see where this leads. Would you give me that chance?" Ophelia looked at their joined hands, his so much larger and rougher from work, hers soft from a teacher's life. It seemed symbolic somehow, the differences between them. But differences could complement rather than divide, could not they? "Yes," she said. "Yes, I would like that." The smile that spread across Wesley's face was like sunrise. He lifted her hand to his lips again, kissing it with that same gentle gallantry. "You have made me very happy." They walked for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. Wesley told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning horses from his father and grandfather, about the books he had read, and the places he hoped to someday see. Ophelia told him about her childhood in Texas, about her parents and how much she still missed them, about the loneliness of the past 5 years, and her hopes for building a life in Ash Fork. By the time he walked her back to town, the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and purple. They stood outside the boarding house, neither wanting to say goodbye. "I will see you tomorrow," Wesley asked. "I have school, but perhaps in the evening." "I will stop by after dinner." He left, and Ophelia went inside feeling like she was floating. Mrs. Winters took one look at her face and smiled knowingly but said nothing, for which Ophelia was grateful. She was not ready to put words to what she was feeling, not yet. The next weeks fell into a pattern. Ophelia taught during the day, pouring her energy into her students. Jack Morrison was slowly coming around, showing real aptitude for mathematics when he applied himself. Lily Chen continued to excel, and Ophelia started giving her advanced reading materials to challenge her. The other children were progressing well, and several parents had stopped by to thank her for the improvements they saw in their children. In the evenings, Wesley would come by, and they would walk or sit on the boarding house porch and talk. Sometimes he brought books to share. Sometimes he told her stories about his work with the horses. Always, he treated her with respect and genuine interest, asking her opinions and listening when she spoke. On Sundays, she attended church and then dinner with the Granger family. It became a routine she cherished, being part of a family again, even in this limited way. Margaret treated her like a daughter. William discussed horse breeding and town politics with her as an equal, and Samuel gradually overcame his shyness enough to joke with her. The town accepted their courtship with benign approval. A few people expressed surprise that Wesley Granger was courting the new schoolteacher, but no one seemed to think it was inappropriate. If anything, it seemed to cement Ophelia's place in the community. She was not just the teacher anymore. She was Wesley's girl, and that meant something in Ash Fork. But not everyone was pleased. Ophelia first became aware of the dissent when she overheard a conversation at the general store. She had gone in to buy some supplies for the school and was browsing the shelves when she heard Mrs. Henderson's voice from the next aisle. "I am just saying it seems odd," Mrs. Henderson was telling someone. "A strapping young man like Wesley Granger could have his pick of girls. Why would he choose someone like her? Someone like her," came Mrs. Ashford's voice, sharp with disapproval. "You know what I mean. She is hardly the type most men find attractive, and she must be several years older than him. Miss Vance is 23 and Wesley is 25. Hardly a scandalous difference." Mrs. Ashford's voice was cold now. "And I would think twice before gossiping about our schoolteacher, Constance. The children adore her and the town is lucky to have her." "I am not gossiping, merely observing. It seems strange, that is all." Ophelia quietly left the store without making her presence known. The words should not have hurt, she told herself. She had heard worse many times before. But somehow they did hurt, because for a few precious weeks she had allowed herself to forget about the judgments and assumptions. She had let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be seen as normal, even desirable. That evening when Wesley came by, she was subdued. He noticed immediately. "What is wrong?" "Nothing, just a tiring day." "Ophelia." He took her hand. "Talk to me." She told him about the conversation in the store, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mrs. Henderson is not entirely wrong. It is strange you choosing me. You could have your pick of women." Wesley's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Henderson is a bitter, narrow-minded woman who drove off her own daughter with her cruel tongue. I do not give a damn what she thinks, and neither should you. But other people must wonder the same thing. Why me? Why you?" Wesley looked genuinely baffled. "Ophelia, do you still not see it? You are beautiful and brilliant and kind. You make me laugh. You challenge me to think deeper about things. You care about your work and the children you teach. You are brave enough to start over in a new place, strong enough to face ignorance and prejudice with grace. Those are the reasons why you. Anyone who cannot see that is a fool. I am not beautiful, Wesley. We both know that. We clearly have different definitions of beautiful then, because when I look at you, that is exactly what I see." He cupped her face in his hands. "Let me tell you what I see. Eyes the color of rich earth, full of intelligence and warmth. A smile that lights up your whole face, soft skin and softer hair. A body that is strong and real and perfectly suited to the woman who inhabits it. That is beautiful to me." Ophelia felt tears spill over. "You see me through kind eyes. I see you through honest eyes. I wish you could see yourself the way I see you. I am trying," she whispered. "You make me want to try." Wesley kissed her forehead gently. "That is all I ask. Give yourself the same grace you give everyone else." They sat on the porch until full dark, not talking, just being together. When Wesley finally left, Ophelia felt steadier. Mrs. Henderson's words still stung, but they had lost some of their power. Because Wesley saw her differently, and maybe, just maybe, his view was the one that mattered. The incident at the store proved to be an isolated one. Most of the town continued to support Ophelia and her relationship with Wesley. But she noticed other small things. A certain clique of women who would stop talking when she approached, cool nods instead of warm greetings from a few townspeople. It was nothing overt, nothing she could point to and say, "This is wrong." But it was there nonetheless, a subtle current of disapproval. She tried not to let it bother her, tried to focus on her teaching and her growing relationship with Wesley. But some nights she lay awake, wondering if she was being selfish. Wesley deserved someone the town would embrace wholeheartedly, someone who would be an asset to him rather than a source of gossip. Maybe she should step back before things went any further, before she hurt him. But then Wesley would arrive with flowers he had picked, or a book he thought she would enjoy, or just his company and easy conversation, and her doubts would fade. How could she walk away from this, from him, from the happiness she had found? 2 months into their courtship, Wesley took her out to see a piece of land a few miles from town. It was beautiful country with rolling hills, a small creek, and a stand of cottonwood trees. "My father is giving me this parcel," Wesley explained as they sat beneath the trees. "He wants Samuel and me to each have a piece of the family land to build on when we are ready. I have been thinking about what I might do with it. It is beautiful. You could build a wonderful ranch here." "That is what I was thinking. Expand the horse breeding operation, maybe run some cattle too, build a house." He glanced at her. "A family home." Ophelia's heart raced. "Wesley, I am not proposing, not yet. I know it is too soon, but I want you to know that I am thinking about the future and you are in it. I wanted you to see this place, to imagine what it could become." She looked around at the peaceful valley, at the creek bubbling over rocks and the cottonwoods rustling in the breeze. She could imagine it. A house, a barn, horses grazing in the fields. She could imagine a life here with Wesley, building something together. "What kind of house would you build?" she asked. Wesley's face lit up. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, revealing a roughly drawn sketch. "I was thinking something like this, 2 stories with a wide porch. A big kitchen because a ranch house needs a good kitchen. A parlor for reading and entertaining. Upstairs, several bedrooms." He paused, then added quietly, "for children eventually." Ophelia studied the sketch, touched that he had thought this through so carefully. "It looks perfect." "Really?" "You can imagine living here." "I can." It was terrifying to admit, to allow herself to hope for something so far beyond what she had ever thought possible. But it was also exhilarating. Wesley took her hand. "Then I will work toward making it real. It will take time, a year or more to build the house and get the ranch properly started. But I am willing to wait, willing to work, if you will consider sharing it with me when it is done." "Wesley, are you asking what I think you are asking?" "I am asking if you would be willing to marry me when the time is right. When I have something solid to offer you, a real home and future. I am not asking for an answer now, just for the possibility, for you to think about it and see if it is something you would want." Ophelia looked at him, this good, honest man who had somehow seen past all her defenses to the person underneath, who had given her back the ability to hope, to imagine a future filled with something other than loneliness. "I will think about it," she said. "But Wesley, I need to be honest with you about something. I am not sure I can have children." His brow furrowed. "What makes you think that?" "I have never been regular in my monthly courses. The doctor I saw years ago said it might mean I would have trouble conceiving. If having children is important to you, you should know that it might not happen." Wesley was quiet for a moment, absorbing this information. Then he said, Children would be wonderful, and I hope we might be blessed with them. But Ophelia, I want to marry you, not some hypothetical future mother of my children. If we are blessed with children, that is wonderful. If not, we will still have each other, and that will be enough. More than enough. The tightness in Ophelia's chest eased. She had been carrying that fear for so long, convinced it would be the thing that drove any potential suitor away. But Wesley, as always, surprised her. "You are an extraordinary man," she said softly. "I am an ordinary man who has been lucky enough to find an extraordinary woman. There is a difference." They spent the rest of the afternoon at the creek, talking about the future in tentative, hopeful terms. Wesley described his plans for the ranch, and Ophelia found herself contributing ideas, imagining where the house might sit to catch the morning sun, where a garden could be planted, where children might play. It was not a proposal, not officially. But it felt like a promise, a commitment to work toward something together. And when Wesley finally took her back to town, Ophelia felt different somehow. Not just hopeful, but certain. This was what she wanted, a life with Wesley in this place, building something real and lasting. The next months passed in a blur of activity. Ophelia's school year was going well. Her students had made remarkable progress, and even Jack Morrison had settled down enough to become one of her better pupils. The town council had already asked her to sign a contract for another year, which she had done gladly. Wesley, meanwhile, had begun the work of developing his land. With his father and brother's help, he started clearing the site for the house and barn, hauling lumber from the sawmill in Flagstaff, digging a well. It was hard work, and he often came to see Ophelia in the evenings exhausted but happy, eager to tell her about the progress. In late spring, with the house foundation laid and the framing beginning, Wesley officially proposed. He did it simply, with no grand gestures. They were sitting on the boarding house porch, watching the sunset, when he pulled a small box from his pocket. "I know I said I would wait until the house was finished," he said, "but I cannot wait any longer. Ophelia Vance, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" The ring inside was simple but beautiful. A small diamond set in silver with tiny flowers engraved on the band. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. "Yes," Ophelia said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, of course, yes." Wesley kissed her then properly for the first time. It was gentle and sweet and filled with promise. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. "I love you," Wesley said. "I have loved you since the day I rode out to that stagecoach accident and found you waiting with such quiet dignity. I will love you for the rest of my life." "I love you too," Ophelia whispered. "I did not think I would ever find this, ever find someone who saw me the way you do. You have given me everything." They decided to marry in the fall, after the harvest season and when the house would be complete. Margaret Granger immediately took charge of the wedding planning, enlisting Mrs. Winters and Mrs. Ashford to help. Ophelia found herself swept up in discussions of flowers and food, of guests and dresses, of 100 small details that transformed their simple plan into something grander. "It is important," Margaret insisted. "You are marrying into one of the founding families of Ash Fork. We have a reputation to uphold." "I do not want anything too elaborate," Ophelia protested. "Just something simple." "Simple does not mean plain. We can give you a beautiful wedding without it being ostentatious. Trust me." And Ophelia did trust her. Margaret had become the mother she had lost, warm and supportive and occasionally overbearing, but always with Ophelia's best interests at heart. Having her help with the wedding was actually a relief. The dress was the biggest challenge. None of the ready-made dresses available would fit Ophelia, so Miss Lucy Hart agreed to make her something custom. The seamstress approached the task with professional enthusiasm, showing Ophelia sketches and fabric samples until they settled on a design. Cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs, simple but elegant. The fittings were difficult. Standing in her undergarments while Miss Hart measured and pinned made Ophelia painfully aware of her body's flaws. But the seamstress worked with matter-of-fact efficiency, never commenting on Ophelia's size beyond what was necessary for the work. "You are going to look beautiful," Miss Hart said at the final fitting. "This is some of my best work, if I do say so myself." Ophelia studied herself in the mirror. The dress was indeed beautiful, the silk draping gracefully over her curves, the lace adding a touch of delicacy. For the first time in her life, she saw herself in a wedding dress and did not feel like an imposter. "It is perfect," she said. "Thank you." The summer flew by. School ended and Ophelia spent her days helping at the ranch, working alongside Wesley and his family. She learned how to tend horses, how to mend fences, how to plant a garden. The work was hard but satisfying, and she fell asleep each night pleasantly exhausted. The house took shape steadily. By August, the exterior was complete and work began on the interior. Ophelia helped Margaret pick out curtains and dishes, furniture and linens. She had never owned nice things before, had always lived in rented rooms with borrowed furniture. Now she was building a home, and the reality of it sometimes overwhelmed her. "Are you happy?" Wesley asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch of the new house, watching the sun set over their land. "Happier than I knew it was possible to be," Ophelia admitted. "Sometimes I am afraid to believe it is real, afraid I will wake up and find it was all a dream. It is real. We are real." Wesley took her hand. "I promise you, Ophelia, this is not a dream. This is our life, and it is just beginning." In September, a week before the wedding, trouble came from an unexpected source. Ophelia was in town buying last-minute supplies when she encountered Mrs. Henderson outside the general store. "Miss Vance," the woman said with false sweetness. "Or should I start calling you Mrs. Granger? The wedding is soon, is it not?" "Next week," Ophelia said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "How lovely. I am sure it will be quite the event. The whole town is talking about it." There was something in her tone that put Ophelia on guard. "I hope they are saying kind things." "Oh, of course, though there has been some concern." "Concern about what?" Mrs. Henderson leaned in conspiratorially. "Well, dear, people are wondering if you are really suited for ranch life. It is very physical work, you know. And of course, there is the question of children. Can you even have them? Because it would be such a shame if poor Wesley married you expecting a family and found himself disappointed." The words were like a slap. Ophelia felt her face burn. "My personal medical matters are none of your concern, Mrs. Henderson. I am just repeating what people are saying. You know how small towns are. People talk." Mrs. Henderson's smile was sharp. "I would hate for Wesley to make a mistake he would regret." Before Ophelia could respond, Wesley's voice cut through the tension. "The only mistake would be listening to a bitter gossip who has nothing better to do than spread malicious lies." He had appeared from the direction of the stable, and his face was dark with anger. Mrs. Henderson paled. "Mr. Granger, I did not mean any offense. I was simply—" "Simply what? Trying to hurt the woman I love, trying to spread doubt and misery because your own life is so empty." Wesley stepped closer, and Mrs. Henderson actually backed up. "Let me make something very clear, Mrs. Henderson. Ophelia is going to be my wife. We are building a life together, and what that life looks like is no one's business but ours. If I hear that you or anyone else has been spreading gossip about her again, there will be consequences. Am I understood? You cannot threaten me, Mrs. Henderson blustered. "It is not a threat. It is a promise. Leave my future wife alone." He offered his arm to Ophelia and they walked away, leaving Mrs. Henderson sputtering on the sidewalk. Ophelia was shaking, though whether from anger or embarrassment she could not say. "Thank you," she managed. "You have nothing to thank me for. I should have said something sooner, should have made it clear that gossiping about you would not be tolerated." Wesley's jaw was still tight with anger. "That woman is poison. She is not entirely wrong, though. I do not know if I can have children, and that is something you deserve to know fully." Wesley stopped walking and turned to face her. "Ophelia, listen to me. I do not care. I truly do not care if we have children or not. I want you. Only you. A life with you is enough, more than enough." Why can you not believe that? Because it seems too good to be true. Because women are supposed to give their husbands children, and if I cannot, then we will have a wonderful life together anyway. We will travel, read books, breed the finest horses in Arizona, teach more children than we could ever have ourselves, grow old together. That sounds like a pretty magnificent life to me. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. "I need you to hear this, really hear it. I love you. Not the idea of you, not what you might give me, but you, exactly as you are. You are enough. You have always been enough." Ophelia let herself fall into his embrace, let herself believe his words. She had spent so much of her life feeling inadequate, feeling like she needed to apologize for her existence. But Wesley made her feel like she was exactly right, exactly enough. With him, she did not have to be smaller or different or less. She could just be herself. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you so much. Then marry me next week and let us start our life together. Let us show people like Mrs. Henderson that love is not about meeting some narrow definition of acceptability. It is about finding the person who sees you, truly sees you, and chooses you anyway." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the sky that deep blue that seemed unique to Arizona. Ophelia woke early, nerves and excitement making sleep impossible. Mrs. Winters brought her breakfast in bed, though she could barely eat. Margaret arrived mid-morning with Miss Hart and Mrs. Ashford in tow, all of them ready to help her prepare. The process of getting ready was oddly soothing. The women chatted and laughed, telling stories about their own weddings and offering advice about marriage. They helped her into the beautiful silk dress, arranged her hair in soft curls, pinned on her veil. When Ophelia finally looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. "You are beautiful," Margaret said, tears in her eyes. Wesley is going to be speechless. The ceremony was held at the church, packed with what seemed like the entire town. Ophelia walked down the aisle on William Granger's arm, having asked him to stand in for her late father. The older man had been honored, his eyes suspiciously bright as he escorted her. But Ophelia barely noticed the crowd. Her eyes were on Wesley, standing at the altar in his best suit, his face alight with joy. When she reached him and took his hands, the rest of the world seemed to fall away. There was just the two of them and the vows they spoke, promises to love and honor and cherish for the rest of their lives. "I do," Wesley said, his voice strong and sure. "I do," Ophelia echoed, meaning it with every fiber of her being. When Reverend Price pronounced them husband and wife, Wesley kissed her with such tenderness that Ophelia felt tears spill over. They turned to face their community as Mr. and Mrs. Wesley Granger, and the church erupted in applause. The reception was held at the town hall, with tables laden with food and drink. The musicians played lively tunes, and people danced and celebrated late into the evening. Ophelia danced with Wesley, with William, with Samuel, with Dr. Stone and Mr. Hoffman, and half a dozen other men from town. Her feet ached and her face hurt from smiling, but she had never been happier. As the sun set, Wesley led her outside to where Goliath waited, decorated with ribbons and flowers. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Granger." "More than ready, Mr. Granger." They rode out to the ranch together, Ophelia sitting in front of Wesley on Goliath's broad back just as she had that first day. The evening air was cool and sweet, the land painted gold by the setting sun. When they reached the house, Wesley dismounted and then lifted Ophelia down, carrying her across the threshold as tradition demanded. The house was beautiful, lit by lamps Margaret had arranged earlier. There were flowers on every surface, and the furniture they had chosen together gave the rooms a warm, lived-in feel. This was their home, their future, their life together. "Welcome home," Wesley said, setting her gently on her feet. Ophelia looked around at the home they had built, thought about the journey that had brought her here. Less than a year ago, she had been sitting in the desert dust, convinced that no horse could carry her, that she was too much for anyone to want. And then Wesley had appeared and changed everything. "I cannot believe this is real," she whispered. "Believe it. We have the rest of our lives to prove it to you." That night, as they lay together in their marriage bed, Wesley held her close and whispered, "Do you remember what you said that day in the desert?" "Which part?" "You said you were too heavy for any horse, and I said—" "Not for mine," Ophelia finished, smiling at the memory. "Not for mine," Wesley repeated. "And I did not just mean Goliath. I meant my life, my heart, my future. You are not too much, Ophelia. You are exactly right. You are exactly what I need." Ophelia kissed him, pouring into it all the love and gratitude she felt. She had spent so long believing she was too much, too big, too heavy, too everything. But Wesley had shown her a different truth, that she was exactly enough, exactly right, exactly who she was meant to be. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. Learning to live with another person, to navigate the small compromises and accommodations that partnership required, was both challenging and rewarding. But Ophelia and Wesley approached it as they approached everything, with honesty, communication, and a deep commitment to one another. The ranch thrived. Wesley's horse breeding program expanded, and they developed a reputation for producing strong, reliable animals. Ranchers and freight companies from across the territory came to buy Granger horses. The income was steady and good, allowing them to continue improving the property. Ophelia continued teaching, though she now rode out to the schoolhouse each morning on a gentle mare Wesley had trained specially for her. The children adored Mrs. Granger as much as they had loved Miss Vance, and her reputation as an excellent teacher spread. The school board gave her a raise and asked her to help train new teachers for other communities in the region. She and Wesley fell into comfortable rhythms, working together during the day, eating dinner as the sun set, spending evenings reading or talking or simply being together. Wesley taught her more about horses, and she taught him about literature and history. They challenged and supported each other, partners in the truest sense. In their second year of marriage, Ophelia missed her monthly course. She tried not to hope, tried to prepare herself for disappointment. But when a month passed, then too, she finally went to see Dr. Stone. "Congratulations, Mrs. Granger," he said with a warm smile. "You are going to have a baby. I would estimate you are about 3 months along." Ophelia sat in shock. She had convinced herself it would never happen, that children were not in her future. And yet here she was, carrying Wesley's child. When she told him that evening, Wesley's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down and apologized for being too rough. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are having a baby." "Are you happy?" Ophelia asked, even though the answer was obvious. Happy does not even begin to cover it. Ecstatic. Overjoyed, terrified, he laughed, but mostly happy, so very happy. The pregnancy was not easy. Ophelia was often nauseated, and as the months passed, her body grew heavy and unwieldy. But Wesley was endlessly patient and supportive, rubbing her aching feet, bringing her ginger tea for the nausea, reading to her when she could not sleep. Margaret was beside herself with excitement at the prospect of being a grandmother. She knitted tiny blankets and clothes, prepared the spare bedroom as a nursery, and shared all her wisdom about childbirth and child-rearing. Even William and Samuel got into the act, building a beautiful cradle and a rocking chair for the nursery. Ophelia had to stop teaching in her 7th month when the riding became too difficult. She spent her final weeks preparing the nursery and the house for the baby's arrival, nesting with an intensity that sometimes surprised her. She had not realized how much she wanted this until it was actually happening. In late spring, on a warm night full of stars, her labor began. Margaret and Mrs. Winters were there, along with Dr. Stone. Wesley stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and encouraging her through the pain. After hours of labor, their son was born. He came into the world crying lustily, a big healthy baby with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. Dr. Stone placed him in Ophelia's arms, and she felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "He is perfect," she whispered. "He is," Wesley agreed, tears streaming down his face. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at her son, Ophelia knew. "Matthew, after my father. Matthew Granger," Wesley said, trying it out. "I like it." "Matthew William, after both our fathers." Little Matthew proved to be a content baby, sleeping well and eating heartily. Ophelia took to motherhood with the same dedication she brought to everything else, though the reality of caring for an infant was far more exhausting than she had imagined. But Wesley was a hands-on father, changing diapers and walking the floor with Matthew when he was fussy, giving Ophelia breaks to rest. The town celebrated the baby's arrival with gifts and visits, everyone eager to meet the newest Granger. Even Mrs. Henderson stopped by with a hand-knitted blanket, though she did not stay long and kept her comments brief and polite. Ophelia chose to accept the gesture at face value, hoping that perhaps time had softened the woman's harsh edges. Watching Wesley with their son, Ophelia often found herself overcome with emotion. He was so gentle, so patient, so clearly delighted by every little thing Matthew did. This was the future they had built together. A home, a family, a life filled with love and purpose. On Matthew's first birthday, the whole town came to celebrate. Tables were set up in the yard, laden with food. Children ran wild through the property while adults chatted and laughed. The Granger Ranch had become a gathering place for the community, and Ophelia loved that their home was a center of warmth and hospitality. As she watched Wesley playing with Matthew, showing him the horses and letting him pat Goliath's soft nose, Ophelia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From that dusty day in the desert, convinced she was too much for anyone, to this moment, surrounded by family and friends, secure in the knowledge that she was loved and valued. "He is getting big," Margaret said, coming to stand beside her. "Hard to believe he is already a year old." "It has gone so fast," Ophelia agreed. "Are you happy, dear? Truly happy?" Ophelia looked around at the scene before her. Her husband and son, her extended family, her friends and neighbors. She thought about her work at the school, her role in the community, the life she and Wesley had built together. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she said. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life." "Believe it. You have earned every bit of this happiness." Margaret squeezed her hand. "You and Wesley are good together. You bring out the best in each other." As evening fell and the party wound down, Wesley brought Matthew over to Ophelia. The little boy was sleepy, his head drooping onto his father's shoulder. "I think someone is ready for bed," Wesley said with a smile. They said goodbye to the last guests and took Matthew inside. Ophelia nursed him while Wesley read from a book of children's stories, their nightly routine. When Matthew finally fell asleep, they laid him in his cradle and stood watching him for a long moment. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Ophelia asked softly. "When you rode out to find me after the stagecoach accident, all the time, best call I ever answered. I was so sure I would be a burden, so convinced that my weight would be a problem. And I was so sure that Goliath could handle anything." Wesley put his arm around her waist. "I was right about the horse, but wrong about everything else." "What do you mean?" "I thought I was just doing a good deed, helping the new teacher get to town. I had no idea I was meeting the woman who would change my entire life, who would teach me what love really means, what partnership really looks like. You were never a burden, Ophelia. You were a gift." She leaned into his embrace, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "You taught me that I was enough, just as I am. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." They stood in comfortable silence, watching their son sleep, thinking about the future that stretched before them. There would be challenges ahead, Ophelia knew. Life was never simple or easy. But they would face whatever came together, partners in every sense of the word. The years passed with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Matthew grew into a bright, energetic boy who adored horses as much as his father did. By the time he was 3, he was begging to ride, and Wesley started him on a gentle pony, teaching him with the same patience and care his own father had shown him. Ophelia returned to teaching part-time when Matthew was 4, bringing him to the schoolhouse with her. He would sit in the back of the room, playing quietly or sometimes participating in the lessons. The other children doted on him, and he soaked up knowledge like a sponge, learning to read by the time he was 5. When Matthew was 6, Ophelia discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter Rose was born in autumn, a small, delicate baby who looked nothing like her robust brother. She had Ophelia's dark eyes and a sweet, gentle temperament. With 2 children, life became busier but no less joyful. Matthew took his role as big brother seriously, always wanting to help with Rose. Wesley continued to expand the ranch, now with Matthew's enthusiastic if not always helpful assistance. Ophelia balanced teaching with motherhood, finding that the 2 roles complemented each other nicely. The community continued to grow and evolve. The railroad brought more people, more commerce, more changes. Ash Fork was no longer quite the rough frontier town it had been when Ophelia arrived. There were proper sidewalks now, a new town hall, even a small library that Ophelia had helped establish. Through it all, the Granger Ranch remained a constant. A place of hard work and family, of horses and love, of steady, quiet progress. Wesley and Ophelia had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wesley surprised Ophelia with a gift, a beautiful bound book, blank pages waiting to be filled. "For your stories," he said. "You are always telling the children such wonderful tales. I thought maybe you should write some of them down." Ophelia was touched. She had always loved stories but had never considered herself a writer. Still, she began filling the pages, writing down the tales she told Matthew and Rose, the ones she shared with her students. She wrote about brave children and loyal horses, about people finding their place in the world, about love that saw past surface differences to the heart underneath. Some of her stories were published in a territorial magazine, earning her a small measure of fame. But she did not write for recognition. She wrote because it brought her joy, because it was another way to teach and inspire, because Wesley believed she could. Matthew grew into a tall, serious boy who was indeed following in his father's footsteps with horses. By 12, he could train a young horse as well as most men twice his age. Rose was quieter, more bookish, but she had a gift with animals that surprised everyone. The most temperamental horse would calm under her small hands. When Matthew was 15 and Rose was 9, Ophelia stopped teaching permanently. The school board had wanted her to stay on, but she felt it was time to focus entirely on the ranch and her family. A new teacher, a young woman from St. Louis, took over the schoolhouse, and Ophelia found she did not miss it as much as she had expected. She had other work now, other ways to contribute. She wrote more stories, helped Wesley with the business side of the ranch, and involved herself in various community projects. She worked with the church to help families in need, organized fundraisers for the library, and mentored young women new to Ash Fork. Her life was full and purposeful. Wesley's hair began to gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished air. He moved a bit slower than he once had, a consequence of years of hard physical labor, but he was still strong and capable. They still rode together sometimes, Ophelia on her mare and Wesley on Goliath, though the great horse was getting older too. On a cool autumn afternoon, when Ophelia was 45 and Wesley 47, they rode out to the creek where Wesley had first shown her the land. It was their tradition to come here on their anniversary, to remember where it all started. 22 years, Wesley said as they sat beneath the cottonwoods. Where did the time go? Into building a life, Ophelia said. Into raising children and breeding horses and being part of a community, into loving each other. No regrets, not a single one. You, Wesley pulled her close. Only that I did not find you sooner. But then again, maybe we met exactly when we were supposed to. Maybe we both needed to be exactly who we were to recognize what we had found. Ophelia thought about the scared, lonely woman who had sat beside an overturned stagecoach, convinced she was too much for anyone. She thought about the journey from that moment to this one, all the fear and doubt that had been slowly replaced by confidence and love. I was too heavy for any horse, I cried, she said, quoting that first day. And you said, not for mine, Wesley finished. Still true, you have never been too much, Ophelia. You have always been exactly what I needed, exactly who I needed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the creek bubble past, remembering all the years that had brought them to this moment. There would be more years ahead, more challenges and joys, more ordinary days that added up to an extraordinary life. Matthew would eventually take over the ranch, carrying on the Granger tradition of breeding fine horses. Rose would surprise everyone by becoming a veterinarian, one of the first women in the territory to do so. There would be grandchildren in time, and great-grandchildren, a whole legacy built on the foundation Wesley and Ophelia had laid, but all of that was in the future. For now, there was just this moment. Two people who had found each other against the odds, who had built a life together through trust and love and unwavering commitment. A life that had started with a simple act of kindness and a horse strong enough to carry them both. As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Ophelia leaned into Wesley's embrace and smiled. She was home, not just in this place, though she loved the ranch and the land and the house they had built, but home in the truest sense, accepted, valued, loved exactly as she was. The cowboy had lifted her up that day in the desert, and he had never let her fall. Together, they had proven that love was not about meeting someone else's standards of acceptability. It was about finding the person who saw you, truly saw you, and chose you anyway. Every single day for the rest of your lives. And that, Ophelia thought, as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, was the greatest gift of all.